This is the exact moment Grecia Quiroz is sworn in as mayor after taking over the office from her husband, who was just murdered 4 days earlier during Dia de los Muertos, and she vowed to continue his legacy. But that's a pretty dangerous legacy to take up, as her husband, Carlos Menzo, publicly declared war on the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. 2025 has been a very dangerous year for mayors in Mexico, with 5 being assassinated in 1 month from May to June. But compared to last year, it's been more of the same. To put into perspective just how bad things are, from the campaign season in November 2023 to the elections on June 2, 2024, 31 political candidates were killed. And in the first 3 months of 2025, there were 50 politically motivated killings, according to Integralia, a consulting agency in Mexico City that analyzes the political environment in Mexico. Now, it should be clear what the motive is behind most of these attacks. Mayor Carlos of a city called Uruapan was very outspoken against the CJNG. He wanted direct confrontation with any violent criminals in his city, including in May when a woman that worked at City Hall was killed and the mayor ordered that lethal force be used against the suspect, essentially ordering his death. And this earned him criticism from the president, as since the presidency of Manuel López Obrador, there's been a popular saying in government, abrazos no balazos, which is commonly translated as hugs, not bullets. But his response to the president was, no hay abrazos para los criminales, hay que dar palizas. There can be no hugs for criminals. For criminals, there must be beatings. And I don't know if taking this kind of stance is brave or just crazy, because he wasn't just insisting that the federal government be tougher on crime. He knew full well that the CJNG had been responsible for a lot of bloodshed in his city. On August 8, 2019, 19 bodies were discovered in the city, with the CJNG taking credit, allegedly as part of their war with another group. But recently, there has been infighting and splits within the CJNG, and many high-ranking people associated with it have been arrested, including 2 of El Mencho's brothers, his son-in-law, and a man known as El Reno, whose arrest, along with that of his bodyguard, essentially put the city in a state of emergency. The mayor called on federal authorities to send in soldiers because he knew what would follow. And during this time, his wife was also playing a role in city government by running a social assistance program for families in Mexico. But of course, the cartels are known for sending a message. At 4 p.m. on November 1st, 2025, the Day of the Dead, one of the assassins is staying at a hotel in front of the plaza that will host an event known as El Festival de las Velas, the Festival of Candles. From here, he watches the mayor and everyone else until around 8:10 p.m. And that is when the mayor is struck 7 times. Carlos had been going against the cartel and federal authorities, as he was even arrested and assaulted by the National Guard when he reported a local cop extorting a woman who was traveling with her daughter. This was a guy that put on his bulletproof vest and went out to make a change. But unfortunately, angering the government and the cartels, he was way in over his head, and something like this was bound to happen. And then, in a move that made headlines all over the world, the city council submitted a formal request to the state to quickly have Carlos's wife sworn in to replace him as mayor, although in Uruapan, the office is referred to as municipal president. But she received backing from the state and federal government, which is big because Carlos was the first independent mayor in the city's history. He split with the ruling party of Mexico, Morena, which holds a majority in the Senate and most governorships. But the new mayor is very popular, as was her husband, especially in her hometown where demonstrations took place calling for justice. The president even invited Grecia to the National Palace in Mexico, maybe as an attempt to sway her into joining the party, or just to show support, as not supporting her will look very unfavorable in the eyes of the public. Maybe it's a good sign, as the late mayor clearly believed the federal government was too soft on crime. But as I said earlier, this year has been more of the same, because just the 2024 election season alone will require its own separate video. And after running through all the political violence this year, I had to narrow it down because some of it is insanely complicated and not outright tied to a cartel, like the mayor of Santiago Amotepec, who was killed in May after being accused of murdering his own brother. And state authorities say that his murder had something to do with that, even though the former mayor tried to kill him 2 years ago. But Martha Mendoza, mayor of Tepalcatepec, sorry if I butchered that, was gunned down in the city center along with her husband. Now, her city has been known to host different self-defense groups that work together fighting cartels in the area. And while that might sound like a noble cause, some of these groups have been criticized for allegedly having links to other cartels, essentially being outsourced to fight a gang war. Now the thing about this mayor is that she was part of a party alliance between the ruling party, the Green Party, and the Labor Party. And just 11 days before her attack, another mayor in the same state under the same party alliance was also murdered. But before that, he was also being investigated for having ties to the CJNG. And that brings us back around to Martha, who also had ties with the CJNG through her sister Blanca. Blanca is the wife of a man known as El Abuelo, which may be an affectionate nickname since that just translates to the grandfather, but Grandpa Juan Jose Farias Alvarez is, according to the FBI, the leader of a cartel known as Carteles Unidos, which is actually an alliance between multiple cartels. And multiple sources, including the FBI and El País in Mexico, state that his alliance actually fought against the CJNG, who was moving into their state. Although Telemundo Los Angeles reported from a source at the Attorney General's office that El Abuelo is actually a former ally of El Mencho, the leader of the CJNG. But if these family ties are true, then the mayor's assassination was probably a result of this conflict, since as mayor, it might have been suspected that she was providing some sort of advantage for her brother-in-law's fight, although nothing like that has ever been proven. But being in a state that borders Jalisco, a back and forth has been going on there since at least 2019, which is when La Catrina, who was a leader in the CJNG, also known as the Grand Dame of Death, commanded an ambush that killed 13 police officers before being arrested the next year after a meeting turned to a shootout. But while the officers were conducting their search warrant, they were all attacked, and La Catrina was fatally wounded. Now, another mayor was killed on June 15th after 4 men arrived on motorcycles and stormed the village hall where she was working. But I couldn't tie this back to any one cartel. However, before her death, the mayor accused the federal attorney general's office of essentially stealing 25 million pesos that was supposed to help with reconstruction after Hurricane Agatha in 2022, which was half of all the money allocated to helping the victims. And just 4 months after her death, 10 officials in the attorney general's office were charged with corruption after they seized a ton of cocaine, which they were supposed to burn, because instead of burning it, they kept it and burned a pile of powdered milk instead. The ruling party of Mexico has blamed the PAN party as they've been accused of drug trafficking, and one of the officials that was arrested as part of this corruption investigation is actually the brother of Santiago Taboada, who is a PAN party member and former mayor of Benito Juarez, which is a middle to upper class borough of Mexico City, not to be confused with the city of Juarez in Chihuahua. Also, as a side note, many Americans don't understand how diverse Mexico is, but this mayor is actually a perfect representation of that, as despite being born and raised in Mexico, he kind of looks like Conor McGregor. But anyway, evidence definitely came out that some corruption was going on in the Attorney General's office, including taking bribes from the suppliers, which has to be a cartel, although it's not clear which one. But being a politician in Mexico, you often have to walk a thin line between fighting crime and not actually pissing off a cartel, because much like in any other country, the wealthiest corporations will do whatever it takes to keep their influence and money flowing. It's just that in Mexico, some of the wealthiest corporations are also willing to kill you, and instead of using lobbying as a legal way to bribe government officials like in the US, they just either bribe you or kill you, or both. It's like bribery, except you as the official have zero leverage in any direction. Because if you report that a cartel tried to bribe you to someone at the Attorney General's office, but you accidentally report this to someone on a cartel payroll, well, then you probably just earned yourself a hitman contract. And if you take a bribe and don't stand up to the cartel, you could be arrested by officials who aren't on a cartel payroll. But honestly, the cartels preferring to just pay you to stay out of their way is probably the only thing keeping Mexico from an actual civil war. Because unlike in countries experiencing a civil war, a cartel leader doesn't really want to become the president. As long as he can convince the president to turn a blind eye, he's probably fine with that. I know videos like this can paint Mexico in a certain light, but many parts of Mexico, like Mexico City for example, are nowhere near being a cartel war zone. As many people from Texas, especially in Austin, moved to Mexico City. It's actually a pretty safe place to live. But being a huge country, there are definitely some very rough patches. But either way, I really do appreciate all you guys' support, because obviously without you guys, I would have no voice. So I can't thank you enough. But as always, I'll see you next time.